Hello everyone. Now today I have two Electrosword Transfiguration decks. Let's quickly take a look at them and then jump right into the replays. Now the first deck of today is right here. It is in fact a Veressa Swirl deck with Jansan to buff the damage. The idea came to me when I was thinking of uses for the Sift Bolt Blessing here, which gives you energy based on the amount of opposing characters affected by Electro at the end of the round. And with this deck it is actually quite easy to get Ion Sunburst using this blessing. And once we got the Ion Sunburst, it is very easy to do decent damage with Veressa. Card wise, there's nothing much special. Double Xingyan talent, so we have an alternative source of big damage, because I mean with this talent you can do massive normal attacks with Xingyan. Otherwise, weapons for draw power and of course extra damage, a lot of cheap artifacts to generate a bit of dice, a little bit more extra damage from heavy strike, and of course Northern Smoked Chicken for some little discounts. And I mean you can see some draw power, extra dice, a little bit of classic food cards and sort of stuff like that. But the game plan very much is just swirl once round one, play the swift bolt, gain energy for Ion Sunburst, spam Veressa skills. Anyway, this is the first deck. Now let's quickly take a look at the second one. And here we have the second one, this time with Cookie, Wanderer and Hazo. If you are by the way wondering what the hell is that name, it comes from Scaramouche, Balladeer, Wanderer, you know, all the names Wanderer has had, so I was being very creative with that name back in the day. Anyway, with this deck you can in fact use both blessings, the Wind Force and the Sift Bolt. You are going to see mostly Sift Bolt because I'm gonna explain it in the replays, but you can use both blessings with this deck and see great success. With this deck you can see very similar cards, some draw power, some extra die, Anemo resonance of course, because this time we are actually running double Anemo characters, weapons for extra damage, Adeptus for extra damage, one Catherine to make sure we have those necessary fast action switches to get the guaranteed swirl, ideally round one, of course against opponents who use Kokomi or Xingqiu for hydro cleansing. We cannot always do that. Of course one Hazo talent, because why not, and well, otherwise nothing really special. The decks themselves aren't that creative when it comes to action cards. It's more about the game plan in today's games, which we'll get to see right up next. Now we'll of course start with the Veressa Jansan deck. Now I do have to mention, for this one replay I'm running different weapons than you saw. It's not the Fruit of Fulfillment or whatever the Sumeru Catalyst weapon's name was. We are running Skyward Atlas in this version of the deck, but I later came to realize that it is actually better to run more draw power instead of just that +1 extra damage that I initially thought would be funny. Anyway, you see the game plan right here. We start most of the time with Xingyan, because you get to see that with the round 1 game plan it's almost always guaranteed that you get the transfiguration to activate. And because you get the Skyladder 3 switch from Xingyan's skill, it is almost always better to start with Xingyan over Jansan, because you might think the ideal way to play is Jansan's skill, get the fast action switch into Xingyan, but with this game plan you see right here, it is almost always guaranteed you get the transfiguration to activate, and you have dice to play the blessing. Also, with the Xinyan Yansan Xinyan game plan, when you do get Xinyan's talent card in your starting hand, you get the maximum 2 stacks for it round 1. And anyway, like in the scenarios where you would start with Yansan, then go to Xianyan, those are of course much easier to dodge for your opponent. You know, the swirl, it's much easier for your opponent to dodge the swirl in those scenarios. Over, like, when you start with Xianyan, that's one action. Switch to Yansan, second action, switch back. Of course, use Yansan's skill, third action, then you fast action switch back. You know, but you've done 3 actions. By that point, most opponents, you know, most decks with their round 1 game plan, they've already like spent all their dice, they've already ended their round, which makes it much more likelier that you get the Stormgale blessing or the Transfiguration activation round 1. So here you can see Skyward Atlas. Like I said, this is an older version. I later changed it and did come to the conclusion that it's better to use the Fruit of Fulfillment, if I remember the name correctly.
My contraptions are calibrated. We may now depart.
Also, with the... when you burst Yansan, if you switch to Varessa, do a Varessa normal attack, Varessa skill, it does not take Yansan out of the Night Soul Blessing state. If you are simply put, if you do after Yansan burst, if you straight up go to Varessa, do a normal attack, do a elemental skill, of course after that Varessa's passive skill activates, you get that 1 free extra attack. Once you've done that, Yansan's Night Soul Blessing doesn't run out, meaning the damage buff keeps going.
Are we going on a trip? Or to a competition?
In this scenario you get to see, like, if you do, in my case, I don't remember why, I guess because I didn't have good dice, that's why I went to Xianyan and played the weapon. In this case, like here, I think we get to see Yansan actually runs out. Yeah, Yansan runs out because I went from Xinyan and one of the passive skills activation was spent on Xianyan getting energy.
My contraptions are calibrated.
But once again, because with this deck you don't really burst your opponents, burst your opponents. You don't really you never really burst Varessa, so you have time to gain your energy back from the blessing, meaning that as long as Yansan is alive, it doesn't really matter if the Night Soul Blessing state runs out. You still get that full energy so easily that you can just go back and refresh the burst. By the way, my opponent of course able to pull off the triple Amrita, because who wouldn't be able to pull it off when they are playing against me? Because everyone seems to play it against me. At least I got I know out of the game, meaning there's no more Lunar Bloom from my opponent, so you know, no more discounts. And this is what I meant, because of the Swift Bolt blessing, it's very easy to reverse Yansan. Also, I could quickly mention, even though I don't remember, I think I burst Xianyan later in the game, but Xianyan's burst gives you the technique. The technique makes it so that your next normal attack is considered a plunging attack, and that works together with Varessa's special normal attack, which deals extra damage when you do a plunging attack. By the way, also, once again, I made a bad order of operations here. Yansan's Night Soul Blessing state has run out. But it's not a big deal. You can see Yansan already has 1 energy back, and eventually the Stormgale, if we don't of course switch to Yansan ourselves, this will bring it back. Of course, triple Amrita doing all the work for my opponents. It is a Yungasaur's deck after all. But yeah, as I was saying earlier, there is that Xianyan burst technique synergy with Varessa as well for this deck. So Xianyan is usually what I consider to be the first character you want to sacrifice, because of course Yansan gives you the burst, the damage buff. You don't want to get rid of Yansan, and Varessa is very weak when she is alone. That's why Xianyan usually the first I want to sacrifice. In the cases where I do get her talent card, you want to, of course, ideally get that one talent card buffed normal attack before you sacrifice her. You're gonna see we got the Yungasaur back to 5 HP, but of course triple Amrita will activate once again soon enough. Also, I don't think I have anything else to say about the game plan. Like I said, after a Yansan burst you really only just spam Varessa's skill, and because Varessa's skill has you switch characters, that also has great synergy with Xianyan's talent card. But despite all of this, the deck isn't that great. Like I win like 50% of my games with this deck, I'd say. Like it is not that good. It is fun to try out. I recommend, like, if you want a fun deck, there is some like real synergy here with, like I mentioned, Xianyan's talent with Varessa's skill, Xianyan's Star Vicar technique from her burst works with Varessa. All of that fun stuff. But overall, like, it isn't that strong. Anyway, let's get into the next replay. Another match with the same deck. Now in this game you get to see better like why this deck isn't that good. Now my opponent, of course, playing full aggro. They are going to go all in from round 1 starting, and now you're gonna see I have the Fruit of Fulfillment weapon here. Like I said, that weapon, it works better than the Skyward Atlas. Like, you, instead of +1 damage per round, you get +2 cards when you play that. Not to mention, because this is 3 unaligned die, it's much easier to play as setup when you end up in scenarios like in the last game. Also in this match, because I was expecting my opponent to start with Tartaglia, you know, start to just spam his skills, I actually started with Yansan. So that, you know, Xianyun would take the majority of the damage after one Yansan skill. Luckily, I still do get the blessing to activate, because my opponent, of course, does not switch characters. And you can see the exact same end of the round scenario can be achieved when you start with Yansan. Of course, in this case, you now have the free switch, and you have the what was it? Once the offense is over, we have the Drift Cloud Wave, which once again, even this works with Varessa, because once again, when you do a Varessa skill, you switch to your next character, which automatically activates this. Also, I don't go for Yansan Burst here, because I'm afraid that my opponent would be able to play a weapon and snipe her here.
Transfixed. I'm all warmed up.
I wait until I'm quite certain my opponent has no way. Of course, there was some, you know, Covenant of Rock and Moonpiercer, but if they had Moonpiercer, they definitely would have already played it. But I got the Yansan Burst, of course. Now I'm expecting I need to sacrifice Yansan here. But we got her burst out, that is enough for me. You can see, like, I'm in a very bad position. Like, Alekino has a lot of HP left. But luckily here, with the use of Heavy Strike, I'm able to use Ian-san to snipe Arlecchino with a normal attack. And of course, because Ian-san has the Nightsoul Blessing points, we are not going to be spending the kinetic energy scale stacks, which are very important for the cleanup to get rid of Tartaglia and Hu Tao here. Also in this match I did get Xianyan's talent card, which means we have that alternative source of extra damage, which is the reason why I don't didn't sacrifice her over Yasan. And you can see there an easy snipe on Tartaglia, though we did have to use another Heavy Strike for it, so we have very little extra damage to take out Hu Tao. But we do have that one extra stack, so if we get something that can keep Xianyan alive for one hit from the opponent, we should be just fine. That one thing, of course, being Mystic Soup, because I have no other source of protection in the deck. And luckily I get just that. Now my opponent needs to have a Heavy Strike or the Skyward Polearm to be able to snipe Xianyan here. And of course, if they don't have that, the Sudden Onrush plus Apex Strike guarantees me another hit with Varessa. So if my opponent doesn't have the right Arcane card here, the Winds of Freedom, there's no way they are able to win. Because of course, Xianyan's talent card has already gotten a lot of stacks. And I even have the weapon here, so I'm able to do just that. Play the weapon with the gladiators. And yes, you can see there, it was very close that I made a big mistake, because I had 3 cards in hand after I played the weapon, meaning if I hadn't gotten a second gladiator there, I would have actually probably lost if my opponent had any source of extra die here. But luckily I got lucky, I got another gladiators, meaning I didn't actually make a mistake here and I still win the game. Or I should say my luck prevented or let me get away with that mistake. I should have, of course, realized the Toon cards earlier when I was, or played the Changing Shifts earlier, so that I would have guaranteed that discounted normal attack with gladiators. Anyway, for the next 2 replays we have the Wanderer deck. Now with this Wanderer deck, I mean, this is firstly very close to the version my opponent is playing. And first things first, I wanna say, I do think Ifa is just better if you wanna play, because if you're going for double Anemo, Electro Sword Transfiguration, first things first, your second Anemo character basically always should be Heizo. Like the Heizo plus an Anemo character, if you're going for the Wind Force, that is just the optimal setup. There's some argument to be made that Dwalin is actually pretty good if you look up the total collapse of Dwalin's skill, but even that, like, it's here and there, hit or miss whether it works out for you or not. But like, if you're going for a Heizo deck, like, of course you want a character that can target off-field, your opponent's off-field characters. That being Ifa, that being Wanderer.
Our bond is strong.
If you are going for the Wind Force. Of course it also works with Jean and Sucrose, but you still end up in a scenario with both Jean and Sucrose, where after that first skill, yes, you do get a double swirl, but after that, if your opponent doesn't switch characters, you don't get a second swirl, or I guess a third swirl in that round. But I'm gonna quickly come into the reasoning why Shift Bolt is actually here the better option. I'm gonna do a bit of talking here now. So, like I said, Ifa is better than a Wanderer for this for a Heizo Electrosphere Transfiguration. Why? Because in the usage within 6 dice, if you use exactly 6 dice, which is the you can consider 6 dice to be like the bare bones, you know, the minimum amount of dice you have to use for your skills every round without any action cards, because you get 8 dice that allows you to do exactly 2 skills with your average average character's kit, where the normal attack and the skill cost 3 dice each. So taking that 6 dice as our baseline for the amount of skills or dice we have for use to do our skills, we will not consider any action cards or any extra scenarios like that. Scaramouche Wanderer compared to Ifa, what is the difference? With 6 dice you get a skill and a normal attack if both are swirls, 4 damage from the skill, 5 damage from the normal attack, a total value of 9. With Ifa, with 6 dice, elemental skill, if it's a swirl, and because we assumed Scaramouche Wanderer got swirls with both actions, we are of course going to assume Ifa gets the optimal setup, meaning a swirl with every skill and technique. The first skill, 3 damage if it's a swirl, and only 2 dice. Then you get the technique. With the technique, if it's a swirl, another 3 damage plus 2 healing. And at that point you've only spent 4 dice in total. You do a second technique with Ifa. You get a third swirl plus another 2 HP, meaning a total value of 13 for the same amount of dice you spent on Wanderers, 1 skill and normal attack. Not to mention, if you have all the guaranteed 8 dice when you start that whole counting business, of course with Ifa's kit you are still able to do another elemental skill, which in the ideal world gets you another +3 value for that round. And all that is to say, Ifa is just better than Scaramouche in all but one way. And that being, Scaramouche Burst is way better at taking out characters compared to Ifa's Burst. And if you are beating Scaramouche over Ifa, I'm sorry, I was saying Wanderer earlier, now I'm saying Scaramouche. Stay with me, I'll try to... You get the point, you know the character. Anyway, the one benefit you have over Ifa if you are playing Wanderer Scaramouche, anyway, is the Burst. Because the Burst is actually able to take out almost any character after just 1 swirl, as you can see here. Of course, this was achieved with the help of a Nemo Resonance. Also, in this matchup, my opponent does not have Covenant of Rock, was it? Yeah, it was the other side of the Frost Moon. But of course, Covenant of Rock is considered to be the best arcane card for Ifa, Heizo, Electrosphere Blessing decks. And my opponent of course is not using it. Also my deck, because I could have the sort of deck where you are also running Covenant of Rock for that +1 normal attack round 1, which makes Wanderer a decent option to pick over Ifa, but there's a simple reason why I play this arcane card, the Lost Legacies in the Sand, and why I play the Electro Swift Bolt Blessing here over the Wind Force my opponent has. And you see it right here. With very minimal setup round 1, all you need to draw is Adeptus or the Genie Lamp weapon, and you can simply just snipe your opponent's character at the start of round 2.
I could have saved more.
Now of course if my opponent did have Covenant of Rock, they would have gotten enough stacks on Hazo round 1 that they would be able to do a Hazo skill here, but you get to see, and of course in that scenario, Wanderer would be probably low enough on HP that Hazo would be able to take him out. But even in that scenario we are still left with Kuki Shinobu, we are left with Hazo with, as you can see here, you should be able to get that 2 stacks of Declension by 1 with activating the Transfiguration, a second from the Burst. In most scenarios it works out. So you should be able to threaten a Hazel skill of your own, on top of the fact that because you have the Swift Bolt, come next round you are going to get max energy in most scenarios for your Kuki, meaning you can threaten another Adeptus Burst with Kuki, alternatively with Hazo, of course. But my point here, the one thing Wanderer has over Ifa is the burst, and if you want to win against Ifa decks with Wanderer, you should go for the burst route, and you should have Adeptus plus the weapon in your deck so that you can guarantee the kill. Anyway, last replay of today. Now there is the secondary version of the same deck that my last opponent played. This time they are running Iansan. That too is of course a pretty popular version of the Ifa Hazo Electrosphere Transfiguration decks. The most popular versions I've seen is with Kuki and Jansan, and honestly I don't know which one. I guess like with Kuki it's easier to guarantee the swirl, with Jansan you have source of extra damage for Hazo, so it's here and there which one is better. But anyway, because it is a very similar deck, I'm going for the exact same game plan. Also in scenarios like this where you don't get a fast action switch in your starting hand, the Lost Legacies in the Sand is once again the way to go as your arcane card, compared to decks like I've seen, because once again you can use the same setup of characters and go for the Wind Force and go for Covenant of Rock to get the Wind Force to activate round 1. But then you are less likely to get the Transfiguration to actually activate round 1, because there is a higher chance that you won't be getting a fast action switch in your starting hand. Anyway, I got lucky with Weapon and Gamblers in my hand, meaning it's quite likely I'll be able to snipe Ifa here, because if you quickly check as Wanderer's Burst, base damage 7, if you have Wind Favor, which you get from using Elemental Skill, you do 8. With Weapon, if the opponent is affected by Electro, you deal 10, or with Adeptus you would deal 11 damage, meaning if you count on top of that whatever swirl damage your opponent takes round 1, Scaramouche Wanderer, once again I'm using both names, is able to snipe basically any character at the start of round 2 if you get either the weapon or the Adeptus. Note that in the scenario where you are unable, like in this scenario, if I didn't have a weapon, if I didn't have Adeptus, I wouldn't be able to take out Ifa immediately. In these scenarios, it is perfectly fine to, let's say, use a normal attack to hit Jans and make your opponent think that that's all you're gonna do. Like you can do a normal attack, you can switch to Kuki if you have, let's say, a fast action switch where you can just fast action switch back to Wanderer after switching to Kuki, and then the Grass Ring has done that necessary damage, so you can snipe the opposing character. But because you are running Lost Legacies in the Sand, most of the time you have either the weapon, either the Adeptus, either Mystic Soup where you can gamble for Fury, and you should be able to snipe one of your opponent's characters. And once again, if your opponent isn't playing Covenant of Rock, I mean my opponent might be playing Covenant of Rock here, but they simply play it round 1, which would be very odd. Nevertheless, in most scenarios you should be able to snipe, and if Wanderer gets killed after the burst, just go to Cookie, next round Swift Bolt will get full energy for Cookie, and then you can use a Cookie burst, or you still have Hazo with at least that double declension stack in most scenarios. And in this game my opponent was actually playing the Fight for the Death. And you can see here the Swift Bolt coming in very useful once again, because now we don't need to spend our 2 declension stacks on doing a Hazo skill, we can simply go for a burst and gain even more stacks. And of course, because my opponent doesn't have more than 1 declension stack, that means Hazo burst is the single biggest thing they can do here, which they of course go for.
Confess!
Also the 1000 Floating Dreams weapon, if you didn't know, the when your character triggers an elemental reaction deal +1 damage, this applies to your off-field characters as well. That's why I'm able to do 7 damage here instead of the 6 it would have been with just the talent card. Because the base damage is 4, if you have 2 declension stacks when you do the elemental skill you get +1. If you have the talent card you get another +1 damage when with or from declension. Basically that one there is changed to 2, so your skill deals 6 damage with the talent card, and if you have the weapon, in this case I did 7 damage because the 1000 Floating Dream activated because my character was doing an elemental reaction. Yeah. So also that means if you have double Floating Dream both with Hazo and Wanderer, your elemental reaction still +2 damage, which is also pretty fun to do, though happens very rarely. It happened to me in one game and it was quite funny to see when Wanderer's normal attack suddenly does like, what was it, 6 or 7 damage. But anyway, you get to see here, Wanderer go for the burst in most matchups. Like if you're against a stall deck that doesn't have a cleansing character like Kokomi, then the Wind Force is probably a better option, even though my version of this deck is optimized for the round 2 burst. But there's nothing stopping you from going for Wind Force with this deck. You just don't, in most scenarios, I guess if you get amazing cards, you can get one. No, actually no, I don't think I even have the cards, even if you get optimal. Yeah, I don't think I don't have. This deck doesn't have the cards to pull off Wind Force activation round 1, but you can go for that sort of deck. But I personally have seen more success when using Wanderer with the Swift Bolt and just going for a round 2 burst. Like against stall, against aggro, against mid-range, it has simply worked better for me to go for the burst instead of going for a Wind Force with Wanderer. So that's just something you can keep in mind if you are planning on playing. And my opponent doesn't even let me to finish them off. No matter, that is all for today, and I'll see you all next time.